All right, welcome back to the channel. My name is Coach Jordan Hargrave. Today we're going to be reading an email. Let's go ahead and get right to it. Hey, Jordan, I don't even know I'm writing this. Words don't even work for what's going on inside me. Everything feels blurry and distant. It's like I'm stuck underwater and no one else even realizes that I'm drowning. Let me try to explain. Imagine waking up and looking in the mirror, but it's not you looking back. Like logically, you know it's you, but your brain's screaming, what if it's not? What if you're losing your mind? Then it spirals. I can't touch my face without wondering if it's real. I'll sit there poking my cheek, begging for it to feel normal. It never does. Yeah. So I remember I used to look in the mirror and it felt like I was looking at my brother, which is really strange. I have two brothers, but one of them kind of looks like me, except for he actually can grow a beard and mustache. But I remember looking at the mirror and my mustache just felt really off and I didn't feel connected to my face. It was one of the most bizarre things that I've ever experienced in my life. And it was so bad and so disturbing that I actually stopped looking in the mirror. Like whenever I was brushing my teeth, I would literally look down and brush my teeth because I hated that feeling. And I didn't know what was happening either. And you mentioned I can't touch my face without wondering if it's real. You know, whenever you're experiencing depersonalization, which is where you feel detached from your body, it has a lot of different manifestations. And sometimes it's isolated to specific parts of your body. I know that for me, my hand, excuse me, my hands were like the number one uh, part of my body that I felt detached from. Sometimes it would be isolated to my head. Sometimes I would feel detached from my mouth and my tongue, and then especially my eyes. I would feel like, and I know it's kind of creepy to talk about, but that's part of the problem is people don't talk about this enough, and a lot of people don't get the help that they need. But I felt like you could say like my soul was kind of like just a little bit behind my body. And I had this hyper awareness of my eyes, and it was absolutely creepy. And I also went numb for a long time, like didn't feel physical pain very much, didn't feel positive emotion, negative emotion. And actually, whenever I was getting a tattoo recently, this rose on my hand, and the last part of it, he said, I want to go ahead and numb you out for this last part. I said, no, no, no. I said, don't do it. I said, I spent years being completely numb and I hate the feeling of being numb so much because of those years of emotional numbness and even a numbness to pain because of the trauma response that I was in. I would rather feel the pain. And he was like, okay. He was like, I've never seen anybody ever do that. And I was like, well, it's because like you would understand if you walked around feeling numb. Like it is the most horrible, empty feeling. It's like whenever you've gone through numbness, you actually have an appreciation for even feeling bad, feeling emotional distress or physical pain. In fact, there's that song, I think Akon popularized it. I think it was like a young boy from Africa or somewhere saying it, but he's like, thank you for sunshine, thank you for rain, thank you for joy, thank you for pain. But it's like, you don't really understand you don't appreciate the sunshine unless you've got darkness and you've got winter and you've got bad weather, right? And it's kind of like that whenever it comes to emotions. Anyway, but I also used to bite my cheeks. I used to feel kind of numb in my mouth and I would sit and kind of bite my cheeks and they would bleed sometimes. It was really, really bad. And don't even get me started on my thoughts. I'll think about walking past a stranger and accidentally shoving them into traffic. Absolutely. Yeah. I work with my clients on this all the time. They'll have some sort of intrusive thought that they're going to hurt somebody or hurt themselves, right? Sometimes this is called harm OCD. As a coach, I can't diagnose or anything like that, but I don't necessarily think the labels are always helpful. But just to encourage you, like there is an actual thing that people deal with, and it's very debilitating. And it's basically just intrusive thoughts about hurting yourself or other people. And I always tell my clients, like, the reason why this developed to begin with is because you would never do these things that you're afraid that you're going to do, right? Like I've been working with, let's say like a stay-at-home mom before, and she has this constant fear that she's going to hurt her kids. and they're usually terrified to tell me this because it's just so contrary to who they are. I mean, I literally remember one specific client. This is probably 5 years ago, but big, beautiful house, family on the wall, just like the perfect family. And she was a stay-at-home mom, just went to church every Sunday, like just one of the most kindest people that you'd ever meet. And she's like, I have these intrusive thoughts that I'm going to stab my kid with a butcher knife. And I don't know what to do about it. And I'll never forget the look on her face whenever I told her. I was like, did you know that the reason why this bothers you so much is because you would never do that? So she was in an anxious state, and her brain went into what's called catastrophic risk assessment, where your brain is feeding you with a lot of different catastrophic scenarios. And she looked at a butcher knife, and she was around her child, or maybe some sort of sharp object. And her catastrophic brain said, well, what if you stab your kid with a butcher knife? And instead of just allowing that thought to be there and staying in a calm body and continuing to use the knives as usual, that thought was so horrifying because she would never do that, that she wanted to get away from that. And so she started to avoid knives and sharp objects. And she was just walking around with this perpetual fear and obsession over these thoughts. And her body was tightened up. She's, trying to get away from that thought, avoiding sharp objects. And that's why, in order to fix this, we have to do opposite of that, right? They're just thoughts, right? As scary as they feel, they're just thoughts. And so I had her use knives as normal, as well as calm her body, and also allow the thoughts to be there neutrally. Just kind of observe them like, okay, interesting. And the exposure coupled with the relaxation, coupled with that neutral attitude, ultimately allowed her to desensitize that. And I have clients that have these harm-based intrusive thoughts all the time. It's a lot more common than you think. I think a lot of people, they don't ever talk about it because there's like this shame attached to it and this kind of assumption that if you have the thoughts, it indicates that there's a desire to actually do it. A lot of people don't realize that you can literally have the most craziest thoughts and you could literally have an opposite desire, right? But just if you're dealing with these harm-based thoughts, just know that that's probably what's going on. The fact that you would never do them is why this association of resistance was formed, which ironically just made it worse and conditioned that sensory data to be associated with even more threat, let's say sharp objects, because now you're running from it. And whenever we resist, our brain thinks is a lion trying to eat us. And so it creates this vicious cycle that people get stuck in. So anyway, don't even get me started on my thoughts. I'll think about walking past a stranger and accidentally shoving them into traffic, not because I want to, but because my brain won't let go of the idea. Then I spend hours obsessing. What kind of person even thinks that? But I can't, and then people get into shame and guilt and beating themselves up, which only further perpetuates the cycle. It's like my brain is glitching, looping, refusing to let me go. The other night, I was chopping vegetables and my hand froze mid-air. What if you lose control? It whispered. I put the knife down and I haven't cooked since. There we go with the avoidance. I can't trust myself anymore. I'm terrified of my own brain. So there's the fear of self-harm. So do you see how this person responded to that intrusive thought of harming themselves with avoidance and muscle tension and obsession, which only fuels the problem, right? But if this person would have just stayed in a calm body, right? Because body relaxation is opposite of threat, neutrally observe like, okay, interesting, right? Or maybe especially good one is, your brain gives you kind of a catastrophic what if scenario. What if I do this? What if that? Just be like, maybe not. Who knows? Leave it neutral because that's opposite of threat. It's whenever you get in resistance, you're like, no, that can't happen. Oh God, what if I did that? Oh, I got to make sure it doesn't happen. And then you start avoiding those objects or things. Avoidance indicates threat. That's what you would do if a lion was present. And so to reverse this, we have to do opposite of the things that you're doing that are communicating threat. So exposure, body relaxation, neutral attitude, and invitation. And it works. It's very effective. People don't get it. My mom says, you've always been such a deep thinker. Deep thinker, this isn't philosophy, it's torment. I want to scream. This isn't me. I didn't choose this. but how you do, I think they might say, how do you explain something you can barely understand yourself? Yeah, it's when you're trying to explain these symptoms to people, if they've never been through them, they're just not going to get it. And it just creates this feeling of isolation, especially if you're dealing with like intrusive anxious thoughts. I mean, it's just gonna, like, especially if people hear that and they don't understand that you can have a thought that has nothing to do with your actual desires, but it actually can be opposite of that. In fact, that's why that thought keeps hanging around, is because you would never do that. If people don't get that, you might get some really awkward looks. Like, you might get judged for that. And so people end up just kind of keeping it all inside. And I think that there might be some wisdom to that. I think you got to be very careful with who you tell about your intrusive thoughts. I mean, like, don't go up to your boss and be like, hey, I've got, this intrusive thought about, something terrible. Just don't do that. But anyway, with that being said, I know that fear. I remember whenever I was going through, depersonalization, realization, and I had the fear of going crazy and the fear of schizophrenia, the fear of epilepsy. And like, I was terrified to tell anybody. I remember, and I was having 20 panic attacks a day, and I didn't know it was a panic attack. And I was feeling depersonalized, derealized, time felt distorted, all kinds of stuff. And I remember finally telling my dad, and I thought that if I told my parents or my family in general, that it kind of represented me just kind of giving up and accepting it. That's why I didn't want to tell anybody. I was like, I'm going to wrestle with this by myself. But the moment that I tell my family, it's kind of like me being like, okay, I'm going crazy. And I told my dad, I didn't even really know how to describe it, but I was like, Dad, I was like, I think 19 at the time. Maybe I was 18. I was like, Dad, I feel like I'm going crazy. I'm losing my mind and I just feel so weird and I just don't know what to do. I feel like I'm dying. And he said, okay, well, son, it sounds like you're having a panic attack. And he said, your mom used to have them. And he said, nobody's ever died of a panic attack. And that right there helped me so much. Did it fix everything? No. But just bringing it out of the darkness and sharing it with somebody who actually knew what I was going through, the relief that I felt. I know it sounds hard to believe this, but I was like, yes, this is a panic attack. I was like, oh, thank God, because my uncle, so my dad's brother, which sadly he's passed away. I think he passed away of mercury poisoning before they really had a cure for it. But, he essentially lost his mind. And, great guy overall, but, he had a sickness and he would talk to himself and just like, one time he shot out my grandparents' light in front of their house. And one time he was driving with my grandma on the interstate and he just put the car in park on the interstate. And I was convinced that I was going to end up like him because I didn't know what was going on. And so just getting that reassurance from somebody that had, at least understood it. I don't know that my dad has ever dealt with any of those symptoms, but it really, really was encouraging. So if you're going through this, just know that you're not alone. And people are beating this every single day. Okay. I'll try random stuff to make it better. A cold shower. Cool. I'm disconnected, but now freezing. Breathing exercise is great. Now I'm hyper aware of my chest moving like it's a machine. Yeah, I remember whenever I initially tried to do breathing, it actually led to a breathing phobia. And I didn't like the idea that my body kind of, breathed on its own, or my heart would beat on its own, right? And so I would constantly check my heartbeat, and I felt like I had to make sure that it was still beating. And then with my breathing, I would do this manual breath, and I was doing a chest breath too. Which, by the way, whenever you're breathing, years ago I used to teach belly breathing, and I don't teach that anymore because that's actually not good. When you're breathing, you want to keep your shoulders still. Your whole belly and chest are going to expand out on the inhale and then go down on the exhale. What I used to teach is just let your belly go up on the inhale and down on the exhale. That's not correct. Your chest is going to move a little bit. You want your whole core to go in, or rather go out on the inhale, out on the exhale. So it's like that. But one thing that kind of helped me break that breathing phobia was reminding myself that my body knows how to breathe. And actually, I did this technique, which if you've got a breathing phobia and you're worried that your breathing is going to stop, this helped me so much. Number one, practice, diaphragmatic breathing, like I just talked about, like 10 minutes a day. Make sure you're not chest breathing. So if your shoulders are going up and your chest like that, that's chest breathing. So practice breathing through your diaphragm. But another thing that I did is I read it online. I just held my breath. The article was like, just try to hold your breath forever. Like you couldn't stop your breath even if you tried to. And that really, really, really helped me. I was like, my God, like not only is my breathing not going to stop, I couldn't even stop it if I wanted to. So anyway, there's a little technique you can do. Let's see here. Therapy helps, I guess. My therapist says you're not your thoughts, which is true. But honestly, that just pisses me off. If I'm not my thoughts, who the hell am I? Yeah, I mean, we definitely need a very specific pattern interrupt to deal with these harm intrusive thoughts. Like I said, you want to shift your physiology. It's all about doing things that are opposite than threat as it relates to the thing that's triggering to you. And so again, intentionally, especially if you can go out of your way to do the thing that you're currently avoiding, that's really powerful. Intentional exposure communicates to your nervous system that there's no danger. Calming the body is really, really important. And then also having that neutral attitude instead of that attitude of resistance. And neutral being, okay, that's interesting. Okay, right? It's not positive, it's not negative, it's neutral. If you do those things over and over and over again, it's very, very powerful. I think your therapist said something great, and it's true, you're not your thoughts. And that's a good starting point. But whenever I'm working with somebody that's going through these harm-based intrusive thoughts, we really do need those three components: the shift of physiology, intentional exposure to the thing that you're avoiding, as well as a neutral attitude, okay? One time I tried grounding myself by focusing on my cat. I stared at her fur, trying to feel fully connected. I think you've seen my cat. She's kind of running around in the background. Hey, Daisy, come here, baby. Anyway, she's the queen of the house, and there's her hair right there, actually, believe it or not. Anyway, I'm definitely not like an animal person, but definitely not a cat person, but I am a Daisy person. My cat is literally amazing. She's just like so nice. She's been there for me through thick and thin. Like literally, I've gone through some really tough seasons in my life, and every night she just runs up and she's just like, hey, what's up? And I almost think that it's just a defense mechanism to make sure that I feed her so she doesn't die. She probably doesn't care at all about me, and that's just to make sure I feed her, but who knows? Comment below if you're a cat person. But anyway, my brain went, what even is a cat? Why does it exist? What if none of this is real? And boom. So there we get into, again, I don't really care for labels too much, but like, existential OCD is sometimes what it's called. And a lot of people that deal with OCD, there's like lots of strains to it. You've got, contamination OCD, symmetry OCD, harm OCD, counting OCD, existential. There's a lot of different strains of it. And a lot of times when I'm working with a client that's dealing with this, it's not just one strain of OCD. But anyway, with that being said, I dealt with severe existential OCD. I'm talking like I thought about consciousness, nature of reality, the afterlife constantly for a long time. And it was all consuming. Like I remember one time I picked up a cup and my brain, or my mind was like, well, what part of your brain is moving your hand to pick up the cup? And I was just like, oh my gosh. And I couldn't look at the sky. It was horrible. It was all consuming. So definitely happens. But I was able to beat it. And the way that I beat it is I stepped out of the boxing ring. I stopped trying to beat the thoughts. And whenever I would have the intrusive thought about existence, I would relax my body. And I would say, even though I have these unanswered questions about existence, everything is okay exactly as it is. And then I would just keep living my life. But whenever I was stopping and tensing up and obsessing over existence and researching about it and trying to just be okay with all these existential theories, it completely overwhelmed me. And I had to do that pattern interrupt over and over and over again. And eventually it worked. And now I can think about existence and it's more of a curiosity versus terror. I avoid people now. They either don't notice or they don't care. My sister called me dramatic when I couldn't answer the phone because I felt like my voice wasn't mine. Oh my gosh, I remember that. I remember my voice would feel foreign, like it wasn't my own, or feel very loud sometimes. Like I remember one time I would talk and my senses were so heightened that literally my own voice was like hurting my ear. Sometimes I would be super sensitive to smell, definitely visual. Oh my God, light sensitivity, eye floaters, blurred vision, double vision. It was so bad at one point in time that literally like I felt like what I was looking at was kind of moving back and forth, and it was just crazy. The visual disturbances, and this happens because your pupils dilate whenever your body is in fight, flight, freeze response, and it's just really increasing the amount of visual sensory data that's coming into your eyes, and it just creates all kinds of visual issues. But it was very, very, very scary. And as far as your sister calling you dramatic, you know, it's already hard enough what you're going through. And for somebody to do that, you know, like there's really just no excuse for that, you know? And I think anybody who responds like that, they probably just haven't been through enough suffering in life. I've had the terror and the gift of a lot of suffering in life. And it's really given me a lot of empathy for people. And, you know, I try to look at people going through things, and even if they're being mean or just, you know, whatever, like you never know what they're going through. You know what I mean? And if you have a loved one that's going through these symptoms, maybe you're watching this for your loved one and they're telling you that they're going through hell, especially if there's depersonalization, realization. But not just that. I mean, even all these symptoms that we talked about, you know, even if you've never been through them, just trust them, and just try, even if you just have a philosophical understanding and not an experiential, just try to just accept that they're going through things that are very difficult to describe with words. And what's going on the inside is not reflective on the outside. So anyway, that's it, I guess. This letter doesn't make sense, but neither does my life. It sounds like you're going through a really, really tough state. If anyone else out there feels like this, or mine is a prison, I see you. At least I think I do, or maybe I don't. Who knows anymore? Thanks. I don't even know. Yeah, so they're going through a lot. Well, I hope that this email has shown you that there's a lot more people going through this stuff than you think. And I'm really glad that this email kind of highlighted kind of the intrusive thoughts about self-harm or harming others. And also we talked about existential OCD as well. You know, one of the things that I found working with clients is they'll kind of convince themselves that they're the only one going through this. And part of co-regulation is understanding that you're not alone. And whenever, you know, they realize that they're not alone, I'm not saying that that fixes everything, but it's one thing if you're going through all these struggles and you're the only one in the world going through it. But if there's a lot of people going through it and there's people who beat it, it's not that it makes what you're going through like less severe, but it gives you a glimmer of hope and it starts to strip away shame. And so what I always tell my clients is, you know, let's bring this out of the darkness, right? Because if you think that you're alone in what you're going through and you just sit and marinate in that, you're going to get to a really, really dark place and very depressed and hopeless. And we don't want that. It's not necessary. Okay. So anyway, with that being said, if this helped you, if you made it to the end, make sure to smash the like button. And I hope that this has helped you. For those of you who follow me, you probably heard me talk about this, but if you're new to the channel, I do have a 5 shifts masterclass. It shows you the 5 shifts to heal anxiety, panic, and depersonalization realization. Make sure to check that out below. It will help you. It's a 45-minute masterclass. I spent over 6 months making it, about 12 hours a day, and I made it to where it will definitely help you. There is an invitation to work with me and my team at the end. Would love to take a look at your situation to see if we can help. All right, that is it. And subscribe as well. Make sure to join the channel if you are dealing with anxiety, panic attacks, depersonalization, realization, OCD, and any of these symptoms that we just mentioned. Okay, that is it. I hope you have a good day. We'll talk to you real soon.